All right, for today's video review, we're going to be taking a look at Transformers Generations Shattered Glass Collection Megatron. Yeah, they've done some interesting things with this figure, which we'll get into in a bit. Here he is with the exclusive comic book cover that he comes with. It still does that thing where it's got like the slightly more reflective paper picking out like the actual shards of shattered glass. There's not quite as much of it as there was on the cover for Blur, so it's not quite as striking, but still pretty nice looking artwork there. So this figure is actually, you couldn't even really call it a remold. It's it's just a straight up repaint of the Siege Megatron mold, but they've included some extra accessories here so that they've kind of like reshaped the alt mode, because the original Shattered Glass Megatron used basically the Transformers Energon, Megatron, and Galvatron mold, which had a flying vehicle for the vehicle mode. So instead of using the regular tank mode for the Siege Megatron, they've included these wing pieces, which you attach onto the side here, and this cockpit piece that you use to pretty much just peg the legs together, like they're just sitting sitting like that, which is a little strange, but you know, it works well enough. It still comes with this sword accessory that was, you used to make the extended barrel for the tank mode on the Siege Megatron, but it's not really like necessary or like really addressed much in the instructions. Like, you could, I guess, still do the same thing where you flip these pieces around to the other side and then slide it through the slot here and peg it into the gun barrel there. But then it kind of just like awkwardly sits over the cockpit and sort of bends it down a little bit. I don't think that looks particularly good, but they haven't really like given you much else to do with this. Personally, I'm content with just, treating it as an extra accessory and putting it in the box, and not really worrying about it, and just like, leaving him with these weapons in robot mode as well, because I think he looks fine without it. But I guess it's nice that they still included it regardless. So you could, if you wanted to, still, make this into the tank mode by just like taking off the wings and taking off this part and then just transforming the legs normally, which I'm not gonna, bother doing there. But like, you can still do that. The actual core figure has not changed at all. It's pretty much just they've, remade the alt mode a little bit by adding these extra accessories, which, it's a little bit strange, I think, but it works well enough. There are some parts on here where it's like, I don't think without the sword in there that the arms stay attached up here like particularly well. So they're just kind of like floating and easy to sort of bump out of the way. It now has this like sort of awkward gap under this turret here, which was normally filled up by like the sword pieces kind of tucking underneath there. So it's a little strange, but for a sort of like abstract Cybertronian flying vehicle, I think it works well enough. And it's cool that they even did that to begin with, because most of the Shattered Glass figures are just like straight up repaints with maybe a new head sculpt of the original ones, which like, it's cool, and they pay homage to the original sort of versions of Shattered Glass figures with like the color scheme and stuff like that. But for example, like the Shattered Glass Blur, like his original vehicle mode didn't really look anything like this because it was using the Armada Blur mold. So it's cool, but this one at least tries to pay homage to the original vehicle mode of the Energon Megatron mold, which is cool, even though it doesn't really look like that whole lot, aside from like the wingtips looking like the wingtips of the Energon mold. But it's an abstract flying vehicle, so good enough, I guess. Here he is with the other Shattered Glass figures we've gotten so far. There's Optimus and Ratchet and Blur. Man, we really need more Decepticons. The only two Decepticons that we've gotten so far, or like had announced so far, are Megatron and Starscream. And then I guess like if you want to count Jetfire, which I wouldn't because he's an Autobot really, but we need it to even out a little bit more. So hopefully they'll do more Decepticons if they do a second wave of these guys. But yeah, it's a pretty nice vehicle mode. Here he is with Kingdom Sideswipe, just for that standard size comparison. And then most importantly, here he is with Siege Megatron in his tank mode, just so you can see like how much they've really reshaped the vehicle mode here. It's pretty much turned backwards. So like these sections here, which was normally the front, is facing the back, and then they've rotated the turret around. So, you know, pretty significant amount of reshaping. But yeah, to get into transformation, you can just take off. He does become a bit of a parts former because you have to take these off and then replace them in robot mode, which I can forgive, but if that bothers you, I guess that's worth mentioning. And then here's like the core of the figure, and it mostly transforms the same, except like the legs just don't really transform a whole lot into their vehicle mode configuration. But yeah, you rotate them around at the waist, and then for the legs, you just rotate them forward, click the foot forward, and then click the heel back, just like that, which is, you know, a bit less involved than the whole, like, you know, it still has all the same parts to do the, like, tank transformation where you, like, rotate it around like that, but you don't need to do that for this figure because the legs don't really have to compress like that. And then for the arms here, you just unpeg them. I'm going to take the weapon off for now. Rotate this whole turret section around on this black piece there. And then take this section, kind of pull it out like that, untab these sections from this white piece, maneuver that sort of so it's behind it. I feel like it doesn't really have a ton of clearance even compared to the original one. It feels a little bit tighter in between those sections, but not too bad. And then you take these sections, rotate them in like that, and then these tabs right here will go into these slots right here on that white panel. Bring the arms around so the shoulders go into these sections right here. Bring the backpack all the way back. Adjust the camera here a bit. Then we can flip out the hands here, take these little sections on the shoulders here and rotate these down. Then the head is, you know, it's on this panel, which thankfully, like, I know I've seen a lot of reports on the original Siege mold of that panel being very floppy. My original Siege Megatron does not have that issue, and this one does not either. That panel, like, it doesn't lock in anywhere, but it is at least a tight joint. So you kind of just, like, adjust that so his head is at the proper height there. And there you have him in his base robot mode. With the cannon, I mean, they want you to put it on the right arm like usual, but something I've always found weird about this mold is they decided to, like, put all the extra detail on the back side of it. Like on the original Siege Megatron, you plug it in and the cannon looks kind of backwards and it has like this awkward, like ugly gap right there. And I don't know, I don't think that looks as good on either of them, but Megatron is supposed to have his cannon on his right arm. Thankfully, since this is Shattered Glass Megatron, I'm like, well, they're supposed to be mirrored, right? So I personally take this weapon and put it on his left arm, and that way you get to see the extra detail, which actually has some like extra painted detail on his deco, and you know it's reversed from the Siege Megatron. In terms of this piece, you pretty much just attach it to his arm as a weapon. Cool, I'm all right with that. I think that looks pretty cool. And then these pieces on the back here, so they were plugged in pretty much like this for the vehicle mode, and then they've got this extra peg right here, which you can rotate them and then plug them on like that for robot mode. So he sort of has those wings peeking out over his shoulders, just like the original Energon Megatron mold. I'm not sure if you're supposed to, like, the instructions I think show him putting them like this, but you could put them on the other way if you want them to sit a little bit lower. And I think technically that would be like more accurate to the original Energon mold too, because like his wings flip around so the tips are pointed down like that. I'm pretty sure. Like, I'm trying to think of it. Yeah, because like well, no, actually, no, now that I think about it, I don't know, because you rotate that bit around in the transformation. I don't know. Either way, you can plug them on either way. Personally, I choose to put them the other way around, so the longer tips are pointed up, just because like when I'm transforming this guy, rather than like taking off all the parts as I do it, I usually just leave these on and then, you know, just switch them after the fact to be rotated like that, rather than like taking them off and placing them in a separate place. But yeah, he looks pretty good in his robot mode. Obviously, like the main core of the figure is the same exact mold as Siege Megatron. So same articulation. The head is on a ball joint here. It still has that kind of weird ball joint that's like placed super far back. So like he sort of off centers his head when he rotates his head, which is a little weird. And he can look up a little bit, and then if you use that panel, you can look up a lot more or down, but it looks kind of weird. The shoulders here are just on swivels, and then can also rotate out to the side. He's got a bicep swivel at the elbow, a pretty much 90-degree bend at the elbow. Only the wrist can only rotate in like that. It's got a waist cut that works nicely. Hips can go forward and back and out to the side. It's got a thigh swivel, about 90 degrees of bend at the knee, and then the feet have that tilt that sort of clicks in, and then you sort of unclick it to actually activate it. On my Siege Megatron, I've noticed that the heel piece sometimes like gets a little bit dislodged, which makes him sort of fall backwards, because in general, I feel like the feet on this mold like really should be tilted a little bit more forward, because like if you look at his like center of gravity here, like his legs go right through up here, but then he's got this huge backpack. So like I don't like that the feet are like as tilted as back as they are, because then it kind of like does this backwards slant to the leg, which always makes him feel like he's going to easily fall over. It's not the end of the world, but if the feet had like a bit of movement where they could tilt forward a little bit, that would fix that entire problem. But that's just a carryover from the Siege mold as well. He can still hold his weapon, obviously, although like again, like this really seems like it was much more of an afterthought, just like included just for the heck of it, because like you can't even really store it now because he's got these wing pieces on here, which use up both of the peg holes that were on his back. And there's no other peg holes like on the wing pieces, so you really can't do anything with it other than put it in his hand, which like he's already got this huge blade on his arm and the huge cannon, so like having a third weapon just like seems pretty redundant, and there's no way to store it. So like again, it feels like they included it just for the heck of it, which I guess is fine, but it doesn't really have any like real integration in this figure at all. But yeah, here he is again with just for the standard size comparison. Here he is with Sideswipe. Here he is with the other Shattered Glass guys. Here's Optimus and Ratchet and Blur. And they look pretty good together so far, although again, like we definitely need more Decepticons to kind of even this out a little bit. He looks particularly good, I think, with Optimus, just because they're the Optimus and Megatron, the two rivals, even if the roles are reversed. I like that he's sort of got this like sort of superhero-y kind of color scheme. I think it really works for him. And here he is again with Siege Megatron, just so you can see just how the extra parts really change the overall silhouette of him. But overall, it's still pretty much the same mold. Like, there's no new sculpted details aside from the new parts, which is fine, because, I'd rather that they do, like, the things with adding the new parts than like, just give him a slightly different head sculpt. Although the original Shattered Glass Megatron, his head sculpt looked a bit more like that, like that early commercial Megatron design where he had the rounded head that also showed up in the comics a little bit more. So it would have been cool to maybe get a different head sculpt. But again, I think that probably, adding the wing and the blade accessory was more important. So I think it works well enough. But yeah, they look pretty good together. And yeah, there's not really a whole lot else to say about him. He's a pretty good figure in terms of the mold degradation or whatever. Like, he feels pretty good. He feels just about as good as Siege Megatron, which is surprising considering Lord knows how many times they've used this mold by now. So I would expect it to be not holding up quite as well. It's holding up. I was kind of concerned when I got Blur, because this was only the second use of this mold, and he's got a bunch of sort of looser parts. And then I realized that in the Blur video, I mentioned how one of his feet didn't peg in under the vehicle mode, and I realized that it wasn't because of the peg tolerance or whatever, it's because he's got 2 left feet, which you don't really notice and is not a biggest deal. But like if you actually look at like the underside of the feet here, they're not symmetrical. They're the same piece, which is a kind of a bummer. But whatever. Either way, like I haven't really experienced anything like that with him. He feels pretty sturdy and solid, even maybe more so than the original Siege Megatron. But yeah, he's a pretty nice figure overall, and definitely a nice addition to the Shattered Glass collection. If you enjoy my videos, make sure to leave a like and consider subscribing. I do reviews every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. And without further ado, here we have Transformers Generations Shattered Glass Collection Megatron.